Hello and welcome to Geology, your channel dedicated to making concepts in biology simple, easy to understand and interesting. We are back again today to revise the respiratory system. It's going to be a short session today. It's a small topic and I'll try to wind it up also quickly. So without wasting much time, let's dive into it. So for all those of you who do not know me, I'll just repeat for those who have been into my sessions earlier. You already know who am I. So a very quick brief intro about myself is that I am into this education academic profession for the last 2 decades, close to 2 decades. I am also an HR by profession. So teaching is something which I do very passionately. Education has been, academics has been into my, what would you say? It's in my breath, talking about respiratory system, it's in my breath. I enjoy teaching. I have been teaching in various institutes, coaching classes. I also take tuitions at home at present, though I wasn't doing it some time back. But I have had an illustrious career earlier during my school days, where I hold 2 university ranks and I completed my UGC CSIR NET in the first attempt. I'm also a school and a city topper. So with all of these credentials behind, I'm going to talk to you about how I dealt with these subjects when I was a student, and I'm sharing that knowledge across to you and trying to help you to reach the kind of results which I had. So let's begin. We are talking about the respiratory system today, where the process of releasing food, energy from the food, is called respiration. So if we just have to define respiration, it's the process of releasing energy from the food. And this process involves 3 steps. 1, taking in of oxygen into the cells. 2, releasing the energy by burning the food, which happens inside the cell. And then 3rd is the carbon dioxide, which is formed as a byproduct. That and water needs to be expelled or eliminated out of the body. So these are the 3 steps. Now, using the oxygen for releasing the energy by burning food, this process is known as cellular respiration. This happens inside the cells. So this is where your respiration comes. Now, taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide, this process is known as breathing. So cellular respiration and breathing together comes under the activities of the respiratory system. Okay. Now, there's often a question which comes: what is the significance of respiration, or why is respiration essential? So respiration is essential because it provides energy for carrying out all the life processes which are necessary to keep an organism alive. Okay. So as we keep discussing this topic, we are going to keep looking at these different questions, which I have often seen being repeated in various ways. The language of the question could be different, but the content or the answer that they are seeking is what we are going to be looking at, and that remains the same. Okay. Now, breathing and respiration, they are different from one another, though they are very interrelated. They are part, or they are the 2 functions of the respiratory system, but they are different. How? Because breathing is actually a process of inhaling oxygen from the environment and exhaling carbon dioxide, whereas respiration is a process where glucose and oxygen, glucose is broken down and oxygen is used in the process, and this happens in the cell level. Okay, so breathing happens at the lungs. The location or the site of breathing or the gaseous exchange is lungs, where so it is an extracellular activity, so it happens outside of the cell, whereas respiration is an intracellular activity where it happens inside the cell. Okay, and the breathing is actually a biophysical process, whereas respiration is a biochemical process. So there is a physical activity or a physiological thing that happens while breathing, whereas there is a chemical reaction that happens during respiration. And breathing is to an extent voluntary. You can hold your breath for some time at least. So your inhalation and exhalation can be controlled by you to a certain extent, whereas respiration is absolutely involuntary. You have no idea in which cell the glycolysis or the Krebs cycle or the different reactions leading to breakdown of glucose is happening, and you cannot control it either. There's no energy produced during breathing. In fact, for doing the breathing activity, for taking this physiological, doing these physiological processes, some energy is used. Whereas in case of respiration, energy is produced and it is stored in the form of ATP. Breathing does not involve the action of any enzymes, whereas respiration being a biochemical process, there are a whole lot of enzymes which are required and which are involved for making this respiration process happen and making it smooth. Right? So, are there any doubts, any questions so far? The live chat is on. You can ask your doubts and questions. Yeah. Okay, I don't see any questions right now, so we'll proceed. Now, how is this energy stored? So, when the food is broken down to release energy, energy is stored in the form of an ATP molecule. Okay, so what is an ATP molecule? You don't really need the structure of ATP in your biology perspective, but those of you who are looking at it from a biochemistry perspective, yes, this is how ATP molecule looks like. It has a 3-phosphate. There are 3 phosphate groups. There is a ribose sugar and there is adenine. So it is, ATP is basically adenosine triphosphate. 3 phosphate groups, so it is triphosphate. So the energy produced during respiration is stored in the form of ATP molecules into the cells of the body, and then it is used as and when required. So ATP is a very high energy molecule. ATP, now when we're talking about ATP, we must also know about ADP and PI. So ADP is adenosine diphosphate, which is a low energy molecule, and PI is inorganic phosphate. So now what happens is ADP, phosphate, and energy from the respiration, these 3 come together and then they form ATP. Okay. This is when respiration is taking place, food is broken down, food is in the form of glucose. Okay, so after your digestion happens, finally the food is broken down and it's stored in the form of glucose. Now this glucose, when it breaks down, the energy which is released, this energy combines with the phosphate, inorganic phosphate, and ADP. ADP is adenosine diphosphate. So there are 2 phosphate molecules, and the third one comes from inorganic phosphate and it becomes ATP or adenosine triphosphate. Just the reverse of that happens when we need energy. So when the body needs energy for various endothermic reactions or for various other activities, ATP is used or ATP is consumed. So ATP is then broken down into ADP, phosphate, and the energy for usage. Generally 30.5 kilojoules of energy is released when one phosphate bond is broken. So ATP is known as our energy currency of the cell. So it's called the energy currency of the cell. Okay. Let's move ahead. And this process of ATP conversion back and forth keeps on happening. As and when we have energy, we store it in the form of ATP. As and when we require energy, we withdraw the energy from the ATP. So this process is a cyclic process. It keeps on happening. Okay. Now, let's see this glycolysis. I have a question here. What is the function of ATP other than storing food in the form of energy? Okay, so see, ATP, first thing, it is not storing food. Okay, ATP is storing energy. It is not storing food. And ATP is also used for a few other activities, like it supplies energy during transportation of molecules across the cell membranes. It it provides energy which is required for muscle contractions, for locomotion, for various for various body movements, etc. So basically, the function of ATP is one, to store energy, and second is to supply that energy also. Even for your nerve impulse transmission, protein synthesis, various biological functions, ATP, which is synthesized in mitochondria, this provides, it functions as the primary source of energy. Okay, so it saves it also and it supplies it also. And yeah, I hope I've been able to explain you. Who was that? Hasini. Yeah. Okay. So moving ahead. Now, respiration happens in two steps. One is called glycolysis and the other is called Krebs cycle. Glycolysis has this whole list of steps. For students who are writing a CBSE board exams for 10th standards, do not need this big chain of reactions. So we are going to only understand what is pyruvate. Okay, so just for you to know what how the whole thing is, just a revision. So glucose is a 6-carbon compound, or the food. It is oxidized during respiration. Okay, oxidation of glucose to pyruvate is called glycolysis. So when oxidation of glucose happens, it converts into pyruvate, and this process is known as glycolysis. One molecule of glucose breaks down to give 2 molecules of pyruvate. So that is how your first step, when we are looking at the respiration reactions, the first step of respiration happens in the cytoplasm, which is known as glycolysis, and where 2 molecules of pyruvate are formed. Okay. So the pyruvate or pyruvic acid, it's also called pyruvic acid. It is a 3-carbon compound. So 6-carbon compound breaks into 2 3-carbon compounds. Yeah. Now the fate of the pyruvate depends on whether oxygen is present or not. So further, after the pyruvate is formed by the process of glycolysis, what will happen next to the pyruvate will depend on whether there is presence of oxygen or not, whether there is availability of oxygen or not. Based on that, you will either have an anaerobic respiration or an aerobic respiration. So we get questions like, what is the fate of pyruvate, or what are the different ways in which glucose is oxidized to provide energy in various organisms. So let's see these different pathways now. So glucose is a 6-carbon molecule in the cytoplasm. By the process of glycolysis, glucose breaks down to form pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon molecule and a little bit of energy. Now, in case of yeast, which is where there is no oxygen, there Pyruvate undergoes anaerobic respiration and forms ethanol, carbon dioxide, and energy. Ethanol is a 2-carbon compound, and then there is a carbon dioxide molecule also, and then energy is released. In case of our muscle cells, where there is a lack of oxygen, here there is no oxygen at all. Okay, there's no oxygen. Here there is lack of oxygen, and here there is presence of oxygen. So in the lack of oxygen, in case of muscle cells, in our body, say for example, if we are doing heavy exercises, or we are walking too fast, or we are running, we get these muscle cramps, right? So these muscle cramps are happening because of the lactic acid formation, which is a 3-carbon molecule. And so pyruvate gets converted into lactic acid, and then energy is released. Here there is no carbon dioxide formation, but this lactic acid accumulation is what causes the cramps in the muscles. The third pathway is where we have the presence of oxygen, and that happens in mitochondria, where the pyruvate completely breaks down into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So this is the complete breakdown. So here there is maximum energy which is produced, and this happens in the mitochondria inside the cell. This is aerobic respiration. So the first one is anaerobic respiration. An means without, aerobic is oxygen. So anaerobic means in the absence of oxygen, or when there is no oxygen present. That's why nothing is written. I can also write absence of oxygen, but I just chose not to write anything. So there's no oxygen at all. And if there is lack of oxygen, and then it goes through becomes lactic acid. If there is proper oxygen availability, then pyruvate breaks down completely and gives out carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Okay, we have not balanced the reaction here like in chemistry. It's more of a description. So this is how glucose breaks down into the final products, and this is what we say that the end product of respiration is carbon dioxide. So this process here, this one where in the presence of oxygen, or it breaks down into carbon dioxide, water, and energy in mitochondria. This is known as Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle is still more bigger process than even glycolysis. I have not gone into it at all because we are dealing more with the CBSE syllabus here, where we are not covering this in standard 10. Maybe I'll take that as a separate topic in a separate video. So now let's see the primary difference between these two types of respirations. Aerobic respiration, aero itself means oxygen. Okay, the presence of oxygen. So aerobic respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen, and anaerobic respiration occurs in the absence of oxygen. Easy to remember, an and absent. Then aerobic respiration, there is complete breakdown of food, whereas in anaerobic respiration, there is partial breakdown of food, because you are still getting either lactic acid or ethanol. It's only partially broken down. So the end product of aerobic respiration is carbon dioxide, water, and energy, whereas end product of anaerobic respiration is ethanol, carbon dioxide in yeast, and lactic acid in case of the animal muscles. A lot of energy is produced in aerobic respiration, whereas the energy produced in anaerobic respiration is comparatively less. Organisms which undergo aerobic respiration are like humans, or all multicellular organisms, dogs, cats, whatever, plants. And anaerobic respiration occurs mainly in yeasts, protozoans, bacteria. Okay, so now let's look at the organs which are involved in breathing. So breathing primarily happens in the lungs, and the gases that are exchanged are the carbon dioxide and oxygen. We know that. So the main organs which are involved are the nose, then the nasal passage, then behind that you have the pharynx, The larynx or the voice box is there on top of trachea. Then there is trachea or the windpipe. Then there are bronchus, two of them together called bronchi. There are lungs, there is diaphragm, and inside the lungs, the bronchus breaks down into bronchioles, and then at the end of it, there are sac-like structures which are known as alveoli. So that comes inside the bronchus area, so it's not mentioned separately. Okay. So air enters through the two holes of the nose, that is the nostrils, and it goes into the nasal passage, that is the space behind the nostrils. The hair and the mucus in the nasal passage blocks the dust particles, so that the air which goes to the lungs is clean. And the pharynx basically is the part of the throat between the mouth and the windpipe. So between mouth and the windpipe, the part in between is called the pharynx. So from the nasal passage, the air enters the pharynx first, and then it goes into the windpipe or the trachea. Now, very important thing here to remember, that's why I have put it in red, is that trachea does not stick or it does not collapse, even when there is no air in it. And that is because it is supported by the rings of cartilage. This comes multiple times as a question. It can be a part question in a bigger question, or it could be a 1-mark question. Sometimes it comes as in assertion and reasoning, or in the 5 marks question where it's one of the parts. So it usually comes. Okay. Now, the upper end of trachea has the voice box known as larynx, which doesn't play a role in respiration, but that's a part which is attached there. Now, trachea further divides into two bronchi, or the singular bronchus. Now, the two bronchi are connected to the two lungs. Lungs lie inside the thoracic cavity, and they are separated from the abdominal cavity by the diaphragm. So in the previous, we have seen, this is the thoracic cavity, this is the abdominal cavity, and in between this, there is the diaphragm. So diaphragm separates the thoracic and the abdominal cavities. Okay. Now the lungs are covered by two thin membranes, which are known as pleura, and the lungs are also enclosed inside a bony cage, which is known as rib cage. Now this bronchus divides into bronchioles here. The bronchus divides into smaller parts, which are smaller branches, which are known as bronchioles. And the end of the bronchioles have tiny sacs, which are known as alveoli, which where the gaseous exchange happen. Again, I have made it in red because alveoli is the place or the site where the gaseous exchange happens. Okay. And that is because the alveoli, these balloon-like structures, they're very thin-walled, and they are surrounded by the blood capillaries. Now, these blood capillaries bring in the deoxygenated blood, which comes near the alveoli. Alveoli is filled with oxygen-rich air, which comes from the nose and through all these different parts. So the concentration of oxygen is more in the alveoli, whereas the concentration of oxygen is less, or concentration of carbon dioxide is more in the blood, which is present in the blood capillaries surrounding the alveoli. Blood capillaries, again, we know they are very thin walled, so the gaseous exchange happens by diffusion from the blood capillaries. Carbon dioxide moves out from its higher concentration to the lower concentration in the alveoli. Similarly, oxygen, which has higher concentration in alveoli, moves out of alveoli and goes into the blood capillaries. Okay, so that's how the gaseous exchange happens. Now, how does the process of breathing happen? What is the physiology behind breathing or ventilation? So, when we breathe in air, it is known as inspiration. When we breathe out air, then it is known as expiration. So during inspiration, the diaphragm and the muscles, they contract. So the chest expands. Now in this diagram you can see the diaphragm contracts, so the chest expands. So when the chest expands, what will happen? The volume increases. When the volume increases, pressure or the air pressure automatically falls down. It's like when you have a bigger room, then there is enough space, so it's not too much of pressure. When it's a smaller confined area, the same quantity of air will have more pressure, right? So the air pressure reduces. When the air pressure reduces because of the expansion of chest, the air from outside comes into the nose and comes down through the windpipe and fills in the lungs. This is known as inspiration. During expiration, exactly the opposite happens, where the diaphragm and the muscles relax so that the chest contracts. So air pressure increases and then it pushes the air out through the nose. That is known as the expiration. Okay, so lungs always contain a residual volume of air. That is, a little volume of air is always remaining inside the lungs. This is because, so that the system does not collapse and there is enough time available for the oxygen to be absorbed into the blood and carbon dioxide to be released from the blood. Generally, human beings and an adult breathes about 15 to 18 times per minute, and oxygen, when oxygen combines with hemoglobin, it forms what is known as oxyhemoglobin, which is a very strong, it's a strong binding. And when carbon dioxide, when blood moves to the different parts of the body through the organs, the carbon dioxide which is present, which is released during the cellular respiration we saw, that combines with the hemoglobin in a very weak bonding. So when carbon dioxide, when the deoxygenated blood comes to the lungs, it's very easy for it to break. And then it becomes, hemoglobin has an affinity towards oxygen and it forms oxyhemoglobin, which is comparatively a stronger binding. So it quickly goes and grabs the oxygen and it combines with it. Now here we also need to know about something known as carbon monoxide poisoning or carboxyhemoglobin. Now if there is carbon monoxide available in the environment, then this carbon monoxide and hemoglobin together combines to form carboxyhemoglobin, and this carboxyhemoglobin is a very strong binding. It does not break so easily. So that is why they say that we should not keep the wood fire on and close all the doors and windows, because after some time carbon monoxide starts forming and then it combines with the hemoglobin and forms carboxyhemoglobin. People don't even know they pass away even in sleep if they are in rooms where there is a carbon monoxide available, and because of carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay, so that's the other part of it. Now next, another very from this portion, the important things are the residual volume, wherein questions come about what is residual volume, where you should say that it is the volume of air which is always present in the lungs, so that there is sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed into the blood and carbon dioxide to be released from the blood. And then the other thing that is important here is the carbon monoxide poisoning. Apart from that, inspiration, expiration, generally the process is asked. Okay. So how are alveoli designed to maximize the exchange of gases? This is yet another very oftenly asked question. And generally, this is a question which comes whenever there is a question on respiration. So these bronchioles have tiny pouch-like structures or air sacs in the end, which are known as alveoli. We have seen that. Alveoli are very thin and they are surrounded by very thin blood capillaries. The gaseous exchange takes place through these thin walls of alveoli. We have seen this entire thing earlier. Now, these alveoli are present in millions. Because of their huge numbers and because they're so tiny and with the thin wall, they actually, if you add up all of this, you'll get a very large area. So they basically increase the surface area for gaseous exchange. This is something, this fundamental thing, about increasing the surface area for exchange is something which we have seen in so many places earlier. We have seen this in nephron, where we have seen the convoluted tubule, distal and proximal convoluted tubule. They are convoluted so that the surface area is increased for exchange of this reabsorption. We have seen this in case of intestinal villi in digestive system, where the villi are very thin-walled finger-like projections through which the food is absorbed from the intestine into the bloodstream. Same way, alveoli in the lungs have very thin walls, so they help to increase the surface area for exchange of gases. So the alveoli are designed to maximize the exchange of gases because they are present in millions of numbers and they have very thin wall, and they add up to make a very large area for exchange of gases. And the presence of such large area maximize the exchange of gases in lungs. Okay. So with this, I come to an end of this topic. And if there are any other questions. If not, then we will proceed. As usual, if you have found this session useful, please do subscribe to the channel. You will find a whole lot of information available, study material, productivity tools, NCERT question and answers, and so many other helpful things in the YouTube channel. Please do go through it, and you can also join the WhatsApp group. You can comment in the comment section if you want to join, and if you join the WhatsApp group, you will get to know firsthand about the different things. You can interact with other fellow biology students, and you can also ask your doubts and clarifications free of charge to me. So thank you for the time today. And as I promised, it was a short session, and we've come to an end of it, and wish you all the very best for your upcoming exams. Do well, stay connected. If you have any questions or doubts or queries, feel free to write it in the comment section. Even if the live session goes off now, you will find this recording available in the live tab of Givology channel, and you can go in there. You can ask your questions in the comment section, and I will surely respond to it. Thank you so much, and good night.